Good evening, baseball fans. Welcome to another edition of Stadium Rant's Dirty Leather for Jesse and I. We welcome you once again on this wonderful Sunday evening. Hopefully, it's a little warmer where you are, given the fact that the cold weather is finally starting to subside across most of North America, and spring will hopefully be right around the corner in the next month. So, we are 1 week closer to spring training. All the pitchers and catchers have reported for all 30 teams. And within the next week or two, we will start seeing some spring training action. Now, of course, even with that being said, there's already been some action with regards to injuries, with regards to some of the remaining free agents on the market, and just a whole bunch of other things, including the lead up to the World Baseball Classic next month, which I know a lot of people, not just in North America, but across the world, are going to be watching very closely as the MLB season comes a little closer. So it's going to be a nice little appetizer on top of spring training. So we have a lot to cover this evening in the next hour or so. But first, we are going to once again get into our weekly rant. So for any of the new viewers that are joining in with us this evening, the weekly rant essentially is just us talking about some of the things about our teams or just the state of the sport, whatever the case may be, and just talking about whatever it is that's on our mind and is just nagging at us, whether, like I said, be our team or just the sport in general. So I am going to start off with this this evening, and it is going to be about the Yankees and their logjam in the outfield. So, as I alluded to, last week, essentially, there's a large logjam in the outfield in terms of players. So, if you're not familiar, last month the Yankees re-signed Cody Bellinger to a 5-year, $162.5 million deal, and are now going to put him essentially either in left or center field, basically interchanging with Trent Grisham. And there is currently a battle going on for that fourth outfielder spot between Spencer Jones and Jason Dominguez. However, it does seem like that the Yankees will likely move to Spencer Jones because Aaron Boone has alluded to or has strongly hinted that Jason Dominguez could start the year in AAA Wilkes-Barre Scranton, or Scranton Wilkes-Barre, excuse me. So now the issue is you have 7 different options this year in the outfield. That's including Ahmed Rosario, who can play the outfield, and Oswaldo Cabrera, who has played the outfield for the Yankees. So likely it seems like Spencer Jones is already the front runner for that fourth outfielder spot. But the question is, what do you do with these 3 extra guys? One of those guys is likely going to go to AAA, which again will be Dominguez. Where does Ahmed Rosario fit in that equation? Where does Oswaldo Cabrera fit in his equation, especially as he rehabs from that awful ankle injury he had last year? Now, one thing that I did consider, or I have been thinking about, what if the Yankees pull off a large pre-spring training trade or a trade during the middle of spring training? This is an interesting thought because don't forget, even with spring training, most people think that spring training is just really tune-ups and just getting everything in order. Injuries can still happen during this period of time. Injuries can still happen and completely change the dynamic of a team. So I was looking at the Yankee roster earlier this afternoon. The Yankees still have holes in their starting pitching, especially for the first 2 months of this season. Don't forget that Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon are both recovering from surgery on their elbows. I believe Rodon also had something with this. Yes, he did have elbow surgery as well for a bone spur removal. I just looked up my notes here. So even with Cole and Rodon returning, you will have Cam Schlittler, who's also dealing with an injury as well, some back inflammation, but it should not affect him too much for spring training. You also do have Will Warren as well. You will also have Ryan Weathers, who's your new acquisition that you got over the offseason in a trade with the Marlins. And you also have Luis Hill and Max Fried as well. Max Fried, which will be your frontline starter for the time being. Now, the other thing is that the Yankees have a 5th starter rotation slot available. That's up for grabs. That could likely fall to Ryan Weathers once Carlos Rodon and Garrett Cole come back. However, what happens if Ryan Weathers goes down with an injury? What happens if he doesn't perform well? What happens if there's a setback? This is where it gets very interesting. The Yankees could possibly use an outfielder or 2 in a trade alongside a multitude of pitchers that they have in their system. Because don't forget, 7 out of the 10 top prospects on that team are pitchers. That includes Ben Hass, Bryce Cunningham. That also includes, as I look through my notes here, Chase Hampton, who's recovering from Tommy John surgery as well. You also have the very fast rising and coveted Carlos LaGrange, who is this 6'7", 248 monolith on the mound essentially, and he has a plus grade fastball. He could be a very interesting prospect to trade away if you want to. So that's the other thing to consider. And the Yankees also could need a suitable catcher in 2026 if Austin Wells either gets hurt or he doesn't improve in 2026. He did seem a little lackluster in 2025, especially when it came to on at the plate performance. So if he doesn't improve in 2026, that could be something to consider. If Anthony Volpe doesn't improve in 2026, that could be something to consider, especially if George Lombard Jr. is not ready to come up. There's a lot of things that the Yankees can do with these outfielders in trades or calling them up or moving them around, essentially. And unfortunately, it does seem like that the Yankees, and this is a common occurrence with them. They love to hug their prospects. I've heard a lot of fans say that over the last couple of years. They really don't trade a lot of their top prospects. They don't really move around a lot of their top prospects. They usually just hug them until they come up to the major league level, and then trade them away when they are not as advertised, which severely diminishes their value. So we'll see what happens with that. And again, I want to remind everybody, they do have a surplus of pitching prospects to send to any team. The aforementioned LaGrange, Elmer Rodriguez, who's also fast rising, who could crack the opening day roster if that's possible. Bryce Cunningham, who's also up and coming. Ben Hess, who was a NRI invitee to camp as well. Henry Lane, who is their number 9 prospect, and Brock Selvage, who is a left-handed prospect pitcher who could start in a spot if a rotation needs. So they should really consider taking stock with regards to what they have here, maybe making a major spring training, pre-spring training move, trade, etc. Maybe get somebody again for that 5th rotation spot. Maybe get somebody for catcher depth. Maybe get somebody for a shortstop if you want to move Anthony Volpe after the season or before the season even begins if you lose confidence in him. So that's my rant for this week. But the Yankees, they could be in a position to pull off a pre-spring training trade. Could it happen? Yes. Is it likely going to happen? More than likely not. But it's definitely something the Yankees can consider. So that's my rant for this week.
Yeah, so hey everybody, I'm Doug, just chiming in with my rant. So thank you, Jesse, for that. But I wrote a piece earlier this week about the logjam in the Blue Jays outfield. So it's not just the Yankees that are heading into camp with kind of that problem. I'm not going to call it a problem. I see it as kind of an abundance of options, really. And in the outfield, the Yankees have that, like you alluded to. The Blue Jays absolutely have that. And so do the Red Sox. And if you want to go there, so do the Tampa Bay Rays, right? So heading into camp, 4th outfield spot, 5th outfield spot, there's probably a handful of guys that could easily take that position, right? And the Blue Jays, they've got their starting 2 for sure, similar to what the Yankees have. And then in left field, it's kind of a toss-up, really. They had Joey Loperfido, the Jays did, who they just shipped off to the Houston Astros. So Loperfido, I hate to see him go, but he's going back to Houston where he was originally when the Jays acquired him. So hopefully he's going back to familiar territory where he might get some PT because I really love his game. But the Blue Jays picked up a power impact left-handed bat in Jesus Sanchez in that trade. So the early winner, I think, is the Blue Jays with that Jesus Sanchez acquisition. But where do you put him? Where do you put Sanchez? Because really it's just trading one problem for another. Now, it might be a little bit of an upgrade in terms of power with Sanchez coming in, but you've still got that problem of where he's going to be inserted into the lineup. Because you got to have Nathan Lucas out there. He's proven himself. He should be in left field on opening day. You've also got Davis Schneider, right, who is good against lefties. So if you need a platoon situation, you kind of have it already internally with Lucas and with Davis Schneider. So I don't know how they're gonna put Sanchez into the lineup, but he's got to go in the lineup because that bat is too powerful to be sitting on the bench, right? Yep. And that's quite clear. But that's not really my rant to open up the show. I was going to talk about the Emmanuel Clase story that really is a little bit heartbreaking, really, from a baseball fan's perspective. Now, everyone's got their opinions on the whole case, and there's new evidence that is coming out over the past couple of days that there was sign language and texts that were being sent into him during the game, or just prior to the game, before he was about to go in from the bullpen. That was like a coded language that tipped him off to come in and throw a ball like way out of the zone, like a 50-footer or over the hitter's head. And apparently that dates back all the way to 2023. So this is 2 full seasons where he's been rigging these parlay bets, right? So that's like the cardinal rule in baseball, is that you don't bet. Of course, it's wrong from, a perspective of conventional wisdom. We're not debating that. But what I want to illustrate really is just how sad it is with Emmanuel Clase, because his numbers and his trajectory was not only Hall of Fame worthy, it was in the conversation of him becoming the greatest relief pitcher of all time. And to the point where it wouldn't even have been close, really. I was looking at the comparison between Clase at the age of 27, and if you compare him with Mariano Rivera, who is, I think, everyone's consensus pick as the greatest reliever of all time. He's also the all-time saves leader, right? So just for comparison's sake, I look at Mariano Rivera and Trevor Hoffman, both of whom are in the Hall of Fame. I think Rivera was first ballot unanimous. So at the age of 27, Emmanuel Clase has 182 saves with a whip that is 0.9 and an ERA of, I think, somewhere in the mid ones, right? So Rivera was comparable in terms of whip, was comparable in terms of ERA, but his save total at age 27 was only 48 saves. So in effect, 140 saves less than what Clase has at this age. So that's insane when you look at that, right?
Yeah.
And Hoffman at the same age had a whip that was quite a bit higher than both of those guys. It took Hoffman a little while to really get into that stud category that he was in for, the bulk of his career. He was so good with San Diego, kind of lights out, but he only had 51 saves by the age of 27. Now, both those guys, Hoffman and Rivera, mostly started out as starters, but so did Clase. When he came up in MLB, he was supposed to be projected as a starter, as most dominant closers are when they first come up into the big leagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
But terribly sad, because just looking at where his numbers would be, I mean, even if he were just average for the rest of his career, he easily would have had 500, 600 saves, and would have been into the conversation of being a Hall of Famer. And those 182 saves, and especially the whip, to be under 1 on average when he's starting behind in who knows how many counts. Like, he's starting from a 1-0 count, every time he was giving away those pitches on those parlays. So it's, he's throwing himself behind the 8 ball. He's like, why would he do that? It's just, is the game too easy? Is baseball too easy for Emmanuel Clase that, he's bored? That's all I can think of, really. Who knows what was going on in his head? We don't understand. I don't understand what the mitigating circumstances were for him to have engaged in this activity. Who knows? But the numbers speak for themselves, and he was well on his way to becoming a legend. He already was a legend, right? So anyway, it's unlikely that we'll see Emmanuel Clase in an MLB game for quite some time, probably not ever again. So that's my rant. And when you crunch the numbers, that is a sad, sad story.
Yeah, definitely. And just adding on to that, he was definitely on you can make a case that he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory with regards to his numbers if he continued operating at a high level. And he would have easily been $25-30 million closer, man. Probably the highest paid closer in the history of baseball if he continued that trajectory. So it's really mind boggling to even think or to even understand the logistics and the reason why Emmanuel Clase decided to go ahead and essentially bet on his own pitches, throw them in the dirt, throw the game, and basically throw his career away, literally and figuratively. So it's just amazing. It's going to be a a story for generations.
I'll be
Well
pre-ordering the
after,
book. I'll be pre-ordering the book. I don't know who's going to write it. Hopefully, Tom Verducci is on task right now with
yep,
the preliminary story. But I will definitely be pre-ordering that book because I want to understand that story as much as I possibly can. It's mind.
definitely. I'll be pre-ordering it too. Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to one of the main subjects of our broadcast tonight. Injuries are already starting to pile up before spring training. Within the last week, we have seen three players go down with the exact same injury. So those three players are your New York Mets shortstop Francisco Lindor, uh, Orioles second baseman Jackson Holliday, and Diamondbacks outfielder Corbin Carroll. They all come down with something called a hamate bone fracture or injury, whatever the term is. But I believe it's a fracture. So, what the hamate bone is, from my understanding and from the understanding of medical doctors or sports medicine doctors, is that there is a bone in your hand, essentially located somewhere around here, maybe just a little lower in the palm area. And this usually vital to your grip, and it usually helps you hold the bat and helps you swing and helps you transmit at least some of that power. So in the case of Jackson Holliday, apparently he injured that during a live batting practice session on February 5th. We're not sure whether or not it was a hit by pitch or if he broke it while swinging or whatever the case is. The other two, in terms of Carroll and Lindor, we're not quite sure, but all three of them had the exact same injury, which was this hamate bone fracture. So essentially, what this does is that it is going to affect your grip going forward. So the recovery time for surgeries, and this has to be done by surgery, it has to be cleaned up by surgery, is usually about 4 to 8 weeks. That's usually the recovery time. Now, they've already said in terms of Lindor's case that they want him to get back, or they are aiming for him to come back by the end of spring training, and hopefully he won't miss any time before opening day. We'll see what happens. It's not relatively likely, but we'll see what happens with that. However, the one main issue is that when that hamate bone fractures, there have been some cases where there is definitely effect on their grip, on their power, and their ability to hit the ball. In the case of, I believe, Francisco Alvarez, or I believe it was Alvarez last year, or maybe a year ago, that he had the same exact injury with his hand, and he slumped for the first 20 games after he came back from injury. He did recover, but it took him a while, and he had a good chunk of his season essentially interrupted by that lack of power.
Yeah,
And at the same time,
and it's
Jackson
not.
Holliday.
Yeah. It's the cold weather as well, right? So it's not
Yes.
only the grip, but playing in frigid temperatures. Especially in the Northeast where April is one heck of a cold month. That bone with any vibration is just going to cause serious pain. So it's not an injury that you can really mess around with. I've had that injury before when swinging an aluminum bat, and with the knob of the bat, it's like the knob just jams right into where that bone is
Yes.
located, right? And it's kind of a loose bone. It's a bone that just sort of floats around. So there's not really much connective tissue for it to heal quickly. It's just a lingering injury. And I think, like we talked about in the pre-show, I think Tucker had that last year, right? And that's why he
Yes.
really never got into his normal form in terms of, consistent hitting. He started out hot, and then I think that was the injury that he sustained early in the season as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Yes, definitely. And again, that's going to affect. We'll see what happens in the case of Jackson Holliday, which I think is very interesting because don't forget, Jackson Holliday is still 21, 22, still developing, still really trying to get the feel for the game, get the feel at the major league level at least. So we'll see what happens with him when he comes back from that injury, especially in April, May. We might not see him at his best until June in the worst case scenario, maybe just right before the All-Star break. In the case of Corbin Carroll, in the case of Francisco Lindor, that's also interesting as well, especially when it gets to Corbin Carroll's on base abilities, the ability to hit the ball, and Lindor's ability to also hit line drives as well. So we'll see what happens with that. On the flip side, which is the pitching side, we haven't seen a large amount of elbows blow up, at least yet before camp. But there was one pretty significant injury to Spencer Schwellenbach. Now, if you're not familiar with Schwellenbach, he is one of the pitchers for the Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves are trying to mount some type of comeback season after a really disappointing 2025. They are, in fact, getting Spencer Strider back. They will have Chris Sale for another year. However, Schwellenbach was penciled in basically as their number 3 starter. And it was announced, I believe, a couple of days ago that he had to undergo arthroscopic elbow surgery to remove some bone spurs. And that could knock out most of his 2026 season, if not the entire season. So now you're down to basically 2 full-time starting pitchers in Chris Sale and Strider. And now you will have to turn to Renato Lopez, Grant Holmes, and Bryce Elder, which is not the best.
They also picked up Chris Bassett in the past few days as well.
That was actually the Baltimore Orioles who picked up Chris Bassett.
Was it the Orioles? Oh, okay.
Yes, wow. It was. So they are in a bit of a situation there where they now have to turn to some bullpen arms to try and complete that rotation. Now they can still reach into their AAA farm. They still have Hurston Waldrep. They could get somebody by the name of Didier Fuentes, who is still not ready to come up, but that's somebody you can watch. J.R. Ritchie. Giolito. Giolito we'll talk about in a moment. Carlos Carrasco, who is also an NRI, who is a veteran of the game. They do still have Alicia Hernandez, also a veteran of the game as well, who you might stick in there. But that's going to be very interesting how the Braves try to recover from that, especially with the Schwellenbach injury. Because, again, when you only have Chris Sale and Spencer Strider, who is trying to recover on his own from Tommy John surgery and get back in the groove of what he once was before that injury, that's going to be trouble for the Braves, to be honest with you. And that's going to really affect our 2026 season going forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first Lindor, one person who I don't think is going to be too busted up about the Lindor news to start the season will be Bo Bichette, because it would seem to me that by default, he's going to slide into that starting shortstop role, right? And if you look at the middle of the lineup with the Mets, I mean, it's incredibly solid even without Lindor. So they can certainly afford to have him go on the IL to start the season if need be. And their offense is still perfectly intact. It's a little bit of a downgrade defensively to have Bichette go in there. Actually, it's a major downgrade in comparison to Lindor. But, Bichette will be happy about that. He's a gamer, and he's going to want to play short. So do you want to get into where we think the free agents will go, the remaining?
Certainly. Let's get into the free agent market. And this is where I wanted to bring up Lucas Giolito and other pitchers for the free agent market. Now, most of the top tier, if not all of the top tier free agents in terms of pitching are essentially gone. They've all been taken up. Like we mentioned last week, Framber Valdez, who was the top pitching free agent on the market, signed with the Tigers for 3 years, $118 million. Now, you still have a couple of pitchers on that market that are worth looking at. One of them is Lucas Giolito, who has not been signed yet, which is very interesting because he did have a really decent season last year with the Red Sox, even after recovering from Tommy John surgery as well. I believe he pitched to a 3.41 ERA, had a decent whip as well, and a pretty healthy strikeout rate. So they've been waiting for him. He's been waiting for a call from a team to sign him. That might be where the Braves play in, because don't forget, like I said, there is a little bit of a lack in terms of depth for the Braves in terms of sturdy, steady starting pitching. Now, no knock on Carrasco, no knock on Hernandez. They're both decent pitchers, but are they really, really long-term starting options? More than likely not. They're mainly guys that you will plug in for a stretch and then send them back down to AAA once, somebody's healed up or somebody else is ready to come to the rotation. Lucas Giolito might be signed to a 1 or 2 year deal with the Braves, probably before spring training really kicks off and these games really start off. And the reason why, like I said, the Braves are really decimated in terms of their pitching. And I was actually listening to MLB radio a couple of days ago, and they were talking about how the Braves are very short, not just in terms of their rotation, but their bullpen as well. They're about one or two arms away from losing basically everything in
Well,
the
and I
pitching
can't
department.
remember a time when the Braves were that thin on starting pitching, like going back generations, going back decades. I mean, that's always been the hallmark of the Braves, at least hanging around in the conversation of being in contention, right?
Yep.
Was their starting pitching that absolutely carried them. So for them to be thin in potentially thin in starting pitching, that must be panic for Braves fans, I would think.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at past generations when you had John Smoltz, you had Greg Max, you had all these guys that led you to repeat appearances in the World Series, also led you to one World Series in '95 as well. You have it's a shock because the Braves have usually been known for their pitching as
Yeah.
well as well as some other stars on their offense. Again, Andrew Jones, Chipper Jones for a little bit, Freddie Freeman, obviously, which is another heartbreak story for Braves fans, which we'll not get into at the moment.
Yeah.
But Lucas Giolito could likely head to Atlanta. The other option if Giolito goes somewhere else is Zach Littell. He has also not been signed. He was a pretty decent pitcher for the Reds last year. Not great, but he was serviceable enough. Now, I did think about Nestor Cortez. Problem is that he's injured and he's likely going to miss most, if not all, of 2025. Also with elbow issues as well. They also they're a little light on options, even the free agency market. So again, Giolito or Littell could head off to Atlanta. Littell is the most likely to head off outside of Atlanta for any other spots that may open up. Because don't forget, we are still a couple of days away from spring training games, and we have to see how these injury reports fluctuate. If something does happen, some of these guys will be getting off the board, will be taken off the board. Now, some other pitchers that are available on the free agency market, Frankie Montas, who I don't think will likely get a major big league invite soon because he has been basically non-existent for the last couple of years. And Yankee fans know what I'm talking about with that virtually invisible stint with the Yankees where he was injured constantly. You do have Max Scherzer who's still there. I don't believe he's retired yet. So he might go for one more go. We'll see where he ends up. Tyler Anderson is one. David Robinson retired. I don't know why he's on this list. Patrick Corbin is another one. He did have a little bit of a bounce back season with the Rangers. He could possibly, like I said, slide into Atlanta's rotation as a number 4 starter if there's prolonged injuries and there's prolonged issues with that rotation. So
Yeah,
you do have a couple of options. You do have a few
there
areas where you can
are
go.
options. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if they've got the offense coming back into form, which there's no reason to believe why it won't come back into form, they've still got stud players who are fully capable of putting the Atlanta Braves back into contention. And the front end of their rotation is pretty strong, right? I mean, for sure, if Sale is pitching and Strider is in form, I mean, you don't get much better than a 1-2 punch like that, right?
Yeah.
But if you were going to get someone off the market at this point, and it's between Giolito and Littell, I'd probably want Littell of those two. I mean, I've seen quite a bit of both of those guys, and I know, from the outside looking in, the Jays playing against Giolito or playing against Littell, I would much rather the Jays face Giolito. I think he got shellacked against the Jays a couple of times last year, whereas Littell, we had a hard time with Littell. If he can locate his fastball, which he's always been able to do, he can be effective. He can be a guy who eats up 160 innings, even, closer to 180 innings. And with an offense that's providing some run support, 12 wins, 13 wins. Giolito, I don't see that. I don't see that. I mean, he's been back and forth on the IL even during his good years over the past several seasons, right? And last year would have been considered probably one of his better seasons.
Yes.
Right, with the Red Sox. And still he was left off the playoff rotation. We never saw him pitch in the playoffs. We may have, if the Red Sox had advanced, we probably would have seen him. But we didn't see him in that Yankee series at all. So, yeah, given the choice, the Atlanta Braves, I'd probably pick Littell if they're able to. And they could probably get both for close to the same amount for a 1-year deal,
Yeah.
right? Now, internally, the Braves have always been able to find someone within their system, right? Whether it's Schwellenbach or Bryce Elder or Spencer Strider. And it looks like J.R. Ritchie is probably the next in line, right? He's their number 2 prospect right now. He has an aces build, really. He looks similar to kind of a Cam Schlittler type build and Schlittler type stuff, like a hard thrower, 6'4" frame. And like I said, the Braves have been famous or notorious, if you're not a Braves fan, of bringing up internal talent. And there's no reason to believe why that J.R. Ritchie won't be the next in line for their next great pitcher. So maybe it'll be Ritchie who will be that number 3-4 guy, and that will take some pressure off someone like Giolito or Littell and move them more towards the number 5 spot.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Again, that's mainly one of the big teams, big name teams that will likely be looking for a pitcher as you go into spring training. There are a few, but I don't think any teams need pitching as bad as the Braves do right now, especially, like I said, with a very thin prospect pool in terms of pitching, as well as a thinning bullpen because of the strain on the injured pitchers, and also the fact that Spencer Strider, who we revered, 3 years ago for his dominant performance before he got injured. That's the other thing. How does he perform in his first real full season back from injury? So we have to see how that happens. So they're going to be very busy. One of those two will likely go to Atlanta before spring training happens. That's my projection, at least.
I was also thinking Michael Kopech is still on in the free agent market as well.
Yes.
Highly effective, both with the White Sox and then, of course, with the Dodgers. Not as much in their last World Series run as in the 24 World Series run, where he was an integral part of their bullpen. So Kopech has amazing stuff. Maybe the Braves want to take a chance on him. I know he's had some injury concerns, but when he's on, he's highly effective.
Yes, definitely very, very effective. Now moving on to the batting side of everything. Most, if not all, of the stars are gone. Basically, every star is gone. Again, Kyle Tucker is already signed. Cody Bellinger, again, which we recently discussed, he already signed. Basically, everybody is off. You only have basically scrap metal left on the free agent market, but there's still some pretty nice players. There's maybe a gem in there or two that you could probably scoop up. One of those might actually be Starling Marte. Now, he's 37, so he is definitely aging. He is definitely up there in the age department, but he could still play the outfield for any teams that might need an outfielder. Now, again, the Yankees, of course, are off the table because they have a whole bunch of outfielders. So you're not really going to see a lot of clamoring for Starling Marte in terms of the New York Yankees. But I think one team that absolutely might consider getting at least some depth in their outfield, at least one of them, might be the Phillies. And why do I say the Phillies? Well, when you look at it, you do have no more Harrison Bader and no more Max Kepler. Both of them went to free agency. Harrison Bader already signed with another team, and Max Kepler has been suspended for about 80 games, I believe, for PED use. I believe it was. Yes, so he's off the table. So you're down to basically 3 full or 2 proven outfielders in Brandon Marsh and Adolis Garcia. Now, you do have Justin Crawford, who is a very alluring prospect for the Phillies, but that's another thing you have to watch out for. How does he perform in camp? Is he ready for the big leagues? What does he do against big league pitching? And you also do have Johan Rojas. He has 2 years of experience, but how well does he fit as an everyday outfielder? Is he an everyday outfielder? So that might be a place where you might see Starling Marte go. Maybe you might see Tommy Pham spend another year of his career. Maybe Randall Grichuk go there as well. But the Phillies do need some outfielders, and that's something I've brought up consistently in articles for Stadium Rant, as well as on this show, that the Phillies, outside of Justin Crawford, do need some depth in their outfield, because Brandon Marsh is not going to get it done, because we saw how badly he slumped in 2025. He did pick it up at the end of the year, but he slumped horribly for a large chunk of the year.
Well,
And Adolis
he's not
Garcia,
Brandon
yep.
Marsh. Brandon Marsh is not going to carry a team, right? And
Hmm.
even with Castellanos, them seeming the Phillies are now parting ways. It seems with Nick Castellanos. I'd
Yes.
rather Castellanos over Brandon Marsh. I think in terms of an impact bat in the lineup, I still think Castellanos is probably the better of the two. But I guess they're just moving forward with Marsh. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean he's good on the base paths. He can be a bit of a spark plug, but in terms of power, or I mean his power is basically minuscule, right? He doesn't really put up any power numbers. Marsh doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So they're desperately counting on Harper and Schwarber to really produce next year. And yeah, you're right. They need another bat. That they're outside of those two guys who really need to step up. Harper does anyway. They need somebody. They need an additional bat. I thought actually they'd go after Jesus Sanchez before the Blue Jays did, but I'm thankful the Jays picked him up. But I thought the Phillies were actually going to go after him.
Yeah.
On the pitching side, it looks like I think Max Scherzer might be heading there, right? I've heard musings of some interest with both parties of Scherzer might going over the Phillies. So he'd be a good person to have at the back end of their rotation, similar to how the role that he served with the Blue Jays last year. Hopefully, for the Phillies' sake, he logged some more innings than he did with the Blue Jays. But I still think there's something left in that arm, the Max Scherzer arm. And if the Phillies want to take a chance, he's probably going to ask more for what he's worth at this point. But I still think he's worth investing in for one more year, Max Scherzer.
Definitely. Definitely. I would argue that Max Scherzer still has at least one, maybe two more years left in the tank. Because if you know anything about Max Scherzer, excuse me, he he's a great player. I
He's a
mean,
gamer.
there's really,
A gamer.
yeah, he
Absolutely.
is a gamer. That's a really good
Make the
word.
playoffs. He's the guy who, in high pressure, high leverage moments, he'll even pitch out of the bullpen if you need him to, right? So he's a great teammate, great guy to have in the clubhouse. And Christopher Sanchez is blooming into one of the best pitchers in the game, right? So he'll benefit from having a mentor like Max Scherzer, similar to how, Trey Savage and some of the younger pitchers on the Blue Jays staff or younger players on the Blue Jays roster benefited from having Max Scherzer around the clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, definitely. And another team that I wanted to bring up really fast in terms of the batting side, because again, don't forget a lot of these free agents are outfielders. You do have a few infielders who will likely be picked up as utility guys as spring training comes along. Another team that might go dumpster diving, for lack of better terms, that could possibly be the White Sox. We've seen it before with them. Not this year. Essentially, they've had some pretty nice signings. Don't forget, they did get Munetaka Murakami. They did make some moves for Anthony K and Eric Fetty for their rotation. They might need one more player in terms of.
I have a feeling I know who it is. I think it's going to
Yeah.
be Reese. I think it's going to be Rhys Hoskins. I think they'll take a chance on Rhys Hoskins for that DH role, and
Yes.
he's a dependable bat. He's not going to play anywhere else, right? I mean, but he will be. He'd be a great guy to slot into that DH role, assuming Murakami's going to be playing somewhere in the field. I'm not sure where they'll put Murakami, but probably third base. Murakami will probably be at third.
He could likely start at third base to move Miguel Varas out of that spot. But the other thing is that club does need some veteran presence, because when you look at the service time of this team, five of the starting 9 lineup according to Fangraphs, they don't even have a year's worth of service time. They are still very young and they are still quite inexperienced. So they do need a little bit of leadership. Andrew Benintendi, he's the longest tenured with about 9 years of service time in the MLB. But Andrew Benintendi is not going to be, the end all be all captain of the team. So you might need a second, veteran presence in that clubhouse to at least steer these guys in a direction for 2026 and beyond. After that, you also have to think of beyond after that. Now, Eric Fetty, he could probably help a little bit on the pitching side. But he with 6 years of MLB service time and also some service time in Korea as well.
Right.
But that's another thing I think that should be taken into consideration when we talk about the White Sox.
This is
Yep.
Fetty's second stint with the White Sox, right?
Yes, it is his second stint with the White Sox. So he's familiar with this team. And also, I do believe that you also need a little bit more veteran presence for the upcoming prospects, don't forget, because the White Sox actually do have some pretty good prospects coming up soon. Braden Montgomery might be one coming soon. Noah Schultz. Yep.
They've had the top 5 picks for, the past 10 years, essentially. Right?
Yes.
So one would hope that their system is starting to come together at this point.
Definitely. Again, that's something that I want to stress to all the White Sox fans out there. If you're listening to the broadcast, you actually have some good talent in that pipeline. And Chris Yates, who is the general manager and president of baseball operations, has actually done a relatively good job of at least letting the scouts do the work and getting some of those prospects and helping them, go up to, again, maybe 20, 25, top 100s, so on and so forth. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think that the White Sox may make one last move before spring training just to get some veteran presence in that clubhouse for 2026, which doesn't hurt at all. Because, again, if you have 2 experienced guys in that lineup, it helps more than just having one. Yeah. So, now moving on to the other portion of our broadcast, and I think a lot of international fans have been waiting for this as well. The World Baseball Classic will be starting next month, early March. And a lot of people have been waiting for this. It's the first World Baseball Classic since 2023. So you will have a lot of countries being represented. You'll have Italy. You will have Canada as well, as we'll get to in a moment. You'll have the Dominican Republic. You'll have a great team from Great Britain, which should be very interesting. You'll have one from Panama, Puerto Rico, Venezuela. Good cast of characters. A good cast of nations from across the world will be competing for the coveted World Baseball Classic title. Now, I just want to go over the lineup, especially the roster for Team USA, because let's be honest, that is an unbelievable roster that they have for Team USA. I mean, when you just look at it, you salivate. On the pitching side, you have Tariq Skubal and Paul Skeens in the same rotation, which any team in MLB would dream of. They would salivate at that prospect, having Paul Skeens and Tariq Skubal in your same rotation. They also have Mason Miller there as well, arguably the best closer in baseball at the moment. You also will have Garrett Whitlock, who is one of the better setup guys in that in MLB as well. You will also have Nolan McLean, who I would argue is the best pitching prospect this year, and he will do wonders for the Mets. So pitching one, and you will also have some Yankee representation in David Bednar as well. But that's a really nice pitching roster that you have, much better than 2023 when you look at it, because in 2023 you had Brady Singer, Miles Mikolas, Adam Ottavino, who I personally don't like because I just he was not really good with the Yankees, and he had a little bit of an attitude problem. But you can just tell it's eons, ways and away better than 2023. Infield wise, you have Goldschmidt, you will have Gunnar Henderson too, Bryce Harper, and Bobby Witt Jr. on top of Ernie Clement, who is a Toronto Blue Jay representative playing for USA, which is a bit of a
great utility man, Ernie.
Yes.
Yeah, much better than that.
Definitely. And again, Goldschmidt, Bregman, you have good infielding too. Now, outfielder, you will have to see Corbin Carroll go out because he will be recovering from that hamate bone surgery. They have considered replacing him with Roman Anthony, who's also a pretty decent prospect for the Red Sox and has also proven himself a little bit in 2025. You will also have Byron Buxton, very good player when he is healthy. Aaron Judge, obviously one of the best players in baseball. And Pete Crow Armstrong, who's one of the best defensive center fielders and outfielders in general. And then you will have Kyle Schwarber at the designated hitter spot. So there's a lot to really like about the United States this year. It seems like a much more well-rounded team and a much more power-hungry team. Power pitching, power hitting, so on and so forth. This is a team that loves to feast on power, especially when you have Aaron Judge, when you have Bobby Witt Jr., who can also hit for power as well. Bryce Harper, who is known to be a big power bat. Gunnar Henderson, who can be good in terms of gap and raw power. And you also have Cal Raleigh too. Don't forget him, Cal Raleigh, who just hit 60 home runs in one season and almost beat Aaron Judge's record. So that's going to be a very hard team to really match up against. So, Doug, do you want to go over Canada's roster and how you feel
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, and I get your point. Like your team is stacked. I get it. And really you can't really field a better team than what Team USA is fielding for this WBC Classic. But what do you do in baseball? You hit the ball and you play catch. You hit the ball and you play catch. The names are amazing. They're very recognizable. The stats are undeniable, but you got to go out there and play. And last time, the last WBC, Japan was the best team. They were clearly the best team. Well, I mean, not clearly. It was right down to the very last out where Otani struck out Mike Trout in legendary fashion, kind of solidified that was the beginning of him solidifying his legacy as the best player in the world. Since then, he's had 2 more MVPs and 2 more World Series championships. So Japan is going to be the absolute juggernaut that the U.S. is going to have to contend with. But I wanted to just step off the track of praising Team USA and just being in awe of their talent. It's amazing. I acknowledge that. But the WBC has really done a great job kind of partnering with various organizations. Number one being Baseball United, which a lot of ex-players are starting to invest in. I know Robinson Cano is heavily invested in it. So is Barry Larkin. So is Albert Pujols. I believe they're all brand ambassadors for Baseball United. And Baseball United has done a great job of reaching out to countries that are very athletic, maybe teams that are often represented in the World Cup of Soccer. The athleticism is clearly there, and they've started a nucleus of baseball training, and you're starting to see prospects come from areas of the world where you never used to see that before. So, and you can see it with the representation in the pools of the WBC. You've got teams like Czechia and Australia. I mean, Australia's been there a couple of times now, but Israel is there. They've got some former MLB representation. Nicaragua is also being represented. You got Team Italy. I think Mike Piazza is involved in Team Italy somehow. So you've got countries there that typically aren't in the WBC, and who knows, maybe they'll contend. I got to speak quickly to the Canadian roster. We have more. I say we, I mean Team Canada. I'm not on Team Canada, anyway, broadcasting in from Canada, but Team Canada has, an upgraded starting rotation. They've got Cal Quantrill, Philippe Aimant, who has some MLB experience. They've got Jamison Taillon, who's a tenured MLB pitcher. Michael Soroka, also a tenured MLB pitcher with the Braves. So they've got, 4 or 5 guys. I'd like to see Matt Brash there. Unfortunately, he's not there. So there's not really much they can do after the starter's knocked out of the game. So hopefully the starter kind of posts, some good innings, and they put some runs on the board. But anyway, their lineup, they've got Bo Naylor. They've got the Naylor brothers with Josh Naylor playing first and Bo Naylor behind the dish. And then they've got Edward Julian from the Twins at second base. Abraham Toro, who's bounced around in the MLB for a few teams as well. Otto Lopez. And I think Freddie Freeman might be coming back, but it's not totally confirmed. He did play in the WBC last time around. Again, his mom, his late mother, who he's spoken of and unfortunately passed away early in his life when he was, I think, 10 or 11 years old. Major influence, obviously, as all moms are, or most moms are. And he speaks of his mom often, and he plays for Team Canada as a tribute to his mother. I'm not sure if he's doing that this time around. I'm hopeful that he does. But Team Canada in the outfield also has players like Denzel Clark, Tyler O'Neill, Owen Casey, a powerhouse with the Chicago Cubs. In fact, they didn't mind. Well, I don't know if the pain of losing Tucker was sort of eased with Owen Casey stepping in. But didn't Casey get traded? I think he
Yes,
did
he
get.
did.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where Casey is now. Where did they trade Casey to? I'll have to come back to you on that. Was it the D-backs that he went to?
He was traded, I believe, to the Yes, he was traded to the Marlins this offseason. So he's with
Right.
Miami.
Right, and yeah, that's right. He did good with the Marlins, but anyway, he was highly sought after bat, and the Cubs got a serious pitcher in return for Owen Casey. But anyway, they'll be depending on him for some power. There's also, let's see, that's pretty much it for the MLB contingency on Team Canada. But Team Mexico has major MLB representation as well, as does Venezuela. You've got Jackson Churrillo, Ronald Acuna Jr., and the DR, you've got Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you've got Christopher Sanchez pitching, and Ranger Suarez. But again, like you mentioned, it's going to be very tough to compete against that stacked U.S. lineup. But if anyone can do it, it will be Japan. And, who knows, a third nation will somehow step in there, but it's likely going to be 1-2 Japan, USA again. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on Japan. It's especially with Shohei Ohtani returning as the designated hitter / pitcher, if he does pitch, obviously. But you look at the team there, you will have Munetaka Murakami, who is one of the best power hitters of all time in Japanese baseball history, essentially. You will have Kazuma Okamoto, who just, again, this offseason signed with Toronto, so you will have more Toronto representation. And on the pitching side, you will have that rotation spearheaded by Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who could possibly win a Cy Young at some point in his career, especially if the first two seasons are an indication, he is going to win a Cy Young at some point in his career, especially if he keeps this pace up. He's been fantastic.
Absolutely imminent. And I would hope that he gets the call on opening day as the number one starter for the Dodgers, because as I see it, he's proven himself as their ace, right?
Yes,
Yamamoto.
definitely. And again, you will also have Seiya Suzuki and then Masataka Yoshida rounding the outfield.
Yeah.
All right. Now we will move on to our last segment, and we'll go over this relatively quickly because we are starting to run out a little. We have a little time, but we're going to try to, go through this relatively quickly. Who we believe will win the World Baseball Classic, and these are early projections, obviously, very early projections, because again, anything can change. The lineups can definitely be shifted around, and injuries will always appear somewhere, and you will have to make an emergency substitute somewhere. But, of course, I'm going to be a little biased here, obviously, for obvious reasons. But when you look at the 2023 World Baseball Classic, that was a great tournament. And that was kind of a little up in the air, for lack of better terms, because USA did have a few holes in their lineup. And don't forget how that World Baseball Classic ended. You had a showdown between Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, former teammates, that literally came down to the last strike with a 1-run differential. So it was a fun watch because it was so close, essentially. And there was really just a lot to love about that. This year, I think it's going to be a little different. I think the United States will win very convincingly because, again, when you have a rotation consisting of Paul Skeens, Tariq Schoolboy, Nolan McLean, and you also have Logan Webb, who we didn't mention, and you have Mason Miller closing games. You have Cal Raleigh, which will likely be your cleanup hitter, Aaron Judge, who could be your number 2 hitter, PCA, who would be your leadoff hitter because of his blazing speed, and Schwarber, who would be number 3 or 5 hitter, essentially. That's going to be a difficult lineup to pitch against and to even subdue, especially if your pitching's not very good. The runner-ups that could possibly make an upset win against the United States, and I have to agree, I believe it would be Japan. And, of course, it would have to come on the back of Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Ohtani if he pitches. And, of course, the bat of Ohtani as well, because Ohtani, we know, is a unicorn in Major League Baseball. And he is very, very good. And I think I'm understating that for lack of better terms. But when you also put in Munetaka Murakami, you also have Kazuma Okamoto, you also have Tomoyuki Sugano going back to Japan to pitch for his home country as well after a pretty tumultuous stint with the Orioles. That's going to be very interesting. So we might see a rematch in the championship match between the USA and Japan, but I believe it will be very different this time. I believe the United States has the best lineup. I don't think there's really any question looking at it very early, even with Corbin Carroll being substituted out for Roman Anthony. Roman Anthony is a very good player. So that's where I believe the World Baseball Classic will go in 2026. Now, again, there's always other teams, maybe a third country that could pop up potentially. In my honest opinion, I think the third country that could possibly make a charge could be the Dominican Republic. And why do I say the Dominican Republic? Well, pitching wise, they do have Sandy Alcantara. They have Christopher Sanchez, who's a really good pitcher for the Phillies. And they also have Gregory Soto, Wandy Peralta on the bullpen. You also have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Manny Machado on the same team. Both of them are really big power hitters. I think, and of course, more Toronto representation as well. And you have Junior Caminero, who hit 40 home runs basically at the age of 22, which is unbelievable. And then you have Julio Rodriguez in the outfield and Juan Soto too. So those three teams will likely vie, but I still think Team USA has the best lineup. You agree with me, Doug? Do you have any differing opinions on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, like we've said a few times now, Team USA is unbelievably stacked, but they do have, dare I say, a weakness in the strikeout department, just like they did in the previous WBC. They've got guys who have quite a high whiff and strikeout rate. Byron Buxton strikes out a ton, as does Kyle Schwarber. Judge strikes out a ton. Bryce Harper strikes out a lot, right? So they need those contact guys to kind of set the table. Bobby Witt Jr. definitely falls into that category as a table setter. So does Ernie Clement. So I think you're going to see Clement step in and actually have more of a role than initially intended, right? I think manager Mark DeRosa is really going to see Clement for his true value, just like the Jays manager John Schneider did last year in playing Clement every day, but kind of playing him all over the field. You got to have guys like that in the lineup who just kind of infuriate opposing pitchers by fouling off pitch after pitch and putting the ball in play. Now, you've got guys who can absolutely mash on Team USA, but they do strike out. So when you factor that in, and then you look at the starting rotation, potential starting rotation of the DR, you got guys who are strikeout machines, power pitchers. Christopher Sanchez, they really strike out guys, left and right? Like continuously seasons with well over 200 strikeouts. Sandy Alcantara appears to be heading back into, top form. Brian Bayo is a solid pitcher. And then in the bullpen, you've got Camille Duvall, who throws hard. Sir Anthony Dominguez, who also throws hard. Those guys can strike dudes out. Gregory Soto. So as long as the U.S. is hitting, they're going to, destroy teams. But if for whatever reason they're a little bit slow to begin the season, bat speed isn't quite there, pitchers always have the advantage early in the year. And if the pitchers come out hot for the DR and they've got offense to go along with it, the Dominican Republic's going to be tough to beat. So I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb and say the DR is going to take it. Even though I know the U.S. is heavily favored, I'm going to say the Dominican Republic is going to take the WBC this year.
Interesting take. And that's a very good take because, again, when you have Guerrero Jr., Manny Machado, Juan Soto in the same lineup, that also could easily be top tier when you put it all together, especially in MLB terms as well. One player, just really quickly before we, go off the air for the next week. Let's really quickly go over one player that we wish could have been in our respective lineups. For Team USA, I kind of wish that Mike Trout was there for one more ride. He could still come. He could still, join if he wanted to, but he's going to be 35. His body is really ailing him. Doesn't look like he's going to, unfortunately. That's kind of a shame because I would have loved to see one more rodeo with Mike Trout in Team USA colors. So, Doug, really quickly, what's one player that you wish you could have seen for Team Canada, if you
Well, for
have
Team
one?
Canada, well, I can't just leave it at one. I got to have it as a 1-2 punch in the bullpen. Matt Brash, who has almost an unhittable slider for the Mariners, and Cade Smith, who has unbelievable fastball command and is probably going to step into the Cleveland Guardians closer role. So those two guys would have made a huge difference in the bullpen. But as it stands, the bullpen is really, really thin. So that's why those starting pitchers really have to perform for Team Canada. So, yeah, unfortunately, those two guys, it looks like they're not going to report. I don't know why, but I wish that they had have reported or given some indication that they were going to play. But oh well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I he's going to be a very interesting watch for the Cleveland Guardians, especially with that void left behind by Emmanuel Clase's legal troubles and gambling issues. So that's going to be really interesting to see for 2026. On a side note, all right. With that being said, that comes to the end of our broadcast. Thank you so much for tuning in with us on this Sunday evening. Again, we are creeping on a spring training. Games will start within the next week or two, and we are going to watch it very closely for any major developments that may happen, even before spring training games begin, because there's a lot of baseball to be played. We're going to be with you here all the way until November and even beyond after that. Long season ahead, folks. So get ready. And of course, for Doug and I, thank you very much for tuning in with us to Stadium Rant's Dirty Leather, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.